Hey guys, I'm Sharan. I'm a third year medical student at Lancaster University. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for weekly content and leave a like in this video if you enjoy it. So in this video, I'm going to give a quick overview of 2 apps that I use to make all my notes during medical school. So let's get started with the first one. Okay, so it's easier for me to explain from what I used at the beginning of medical school. So I'll start off with the first app, and that's Notability. Make sure you file all your stuff in the right categories before you start to make notes, and it's important to do that because it will get much harder later on if you have loads of different work and you haven't had them categorized in the right places. So what I normally do is I make a divider for each year. So for first year I made a divider, and for all the different subjects I made different subjects for that. So for example, for my medical sciences, within that I have all the different modules, and if I go to second year as well, I have all the different modules within it. And what I like to do with the titles is that I put the module, and once I've completed it, I literally put complete next to it so that I know I've done it and I can move on to the next one. So that's how I categorize my stuff. If we go on to actually making the notes, so for example, if I just make a new page, what I put is for the title, I'll put the name of the module. If it's for example to talk about the heart, I'll just call it the heart module for the sake of the video. What I like to do at the start is you get a list of objectives at Lancaster, but whether you have a list of objectives or questions or stuff that you need to get done for each module, I have it all written out in the first page, so I can refer back to it when I'm making notes and make sure that I ticked off each bit as I go along. And then afterwards, what I do is for each page, I just split it into 2/3 and 1/3. So on the right hand side, I'll have a third, and on left hand side, I'll have like 2/3. And what this is that if, for example, if I'm gonna do the anatomy of the heart, I'll just go ahead and write all the notes about the anatomy on the left, but I'll keep the right hand side empty for now, because when I do extra reading or if I have extra lectures that have more information on that, then I can add it all on the side whilst I have my main notes on the left hand side. So that's the way that worked for me, and there are loads of different note-taking systems, but this is what works for me because with Notability, you can keep going down, keep scrolling down, and you can just make notes that way. So I make most of my notes on the left hand side, but keep the right hand side for extra notes that I find with the lectures that I get or any extra reading that I do. And normally in first year, when I was learning about anatomy and physiology and histology, like the normal functions of the body, I would come across some clinical relevance that I knew would have been useful for me in my upper years. So usually I use the right hand column to write a lot of clinical relevance, and I used to color code it as purple for any clinical relevance. So that's kind of what I did, and it's a simple method, but it worked for me and it might work for you as well. So I'll just show you an example. Okay, so I'll go on to my first year. So I think the heart module was the 4th one. Yeah, so at the top, the objectives weren't that big, so I just put it right at the top rather than taking a whole page. But yeah, this is what I did. So on the left hand side, I did all my anatomy and bits and bobs, but on the right I kept it as extra notes, as I've labeled it there. So yeah, pretty much that's that. So yeah, so that's what I do. So on the left hand side, I do most of my notes, and on the right I keep it free, so if I want to add anything on, I can. So whilst I was able to make my notes look really pretty and thorough, I wasn't able to test myself during exams, and I found it hard to just absorb everything before my exams. I didn't really have questions or flashcards that I could look at and test myself. So here's where I use Notion to start incorporating that, so that I can prepare myself for when exams can come later down, because there's a lot of content to learn in medicine, and it's all well and nice to make lots of notes on it, but most of the notes are already online, or sometimes the lectures can be your notes itself. So rather than rewriting that and wasting a lot of time, I find that now I use Notion in a way which makes studying way more efficient for me, and it helps me prepare for exams as well because of the style I make the questions in. So I'll just go through how I make notes on Notion. Okay, now I've almost completely changed the way that I make notes at medical school now. So this is Notion and this is my dashboard. I'll show you how. So I'll just go on to, for example, a question bank. So This is just a book that I went through before. Basically what I do is I take every topic, and rather than having the heading of, for example, normal ECG pattern, I change it into a question. So for example, rather than a normal ECG pattern, I change the title into describe the pattern of this ECG. So I change the title into a question. So literally I've made this into literally a list of questions. So for example, in hematology, rather than going through a definition of anemia, I just made it into a question so I can test myself when it comes to exam time. For example, so what is anemia? It's defined by low hemoglobin, having low levels of hemoglobin in your blood. So that's the answer there. I put the answer below there, and these are just extra facts as well, so I'll probably like remember that next time when I test myself. So another question might be, what are reticulocytes? So I looked at the answer there. But yeah, I would test myself. Reticulocytes there, immature red blood cells. But I would test myself and look through what it is. That's extra information as well. It will be increased in certain patients who've got other stuff going on. So yeah, so what I've done is literally changed all the topics into literally questions. So that's how I start to make notes now. And even with lectures, when I get topics and headings, I change it into questions. So that's how I started to make notes on Notion. I'll give an example of how I make it, so for people who are using Notion can get an idea. So I'll just make a new page. So okay, I've just opened it. So I'll just title it, for example, again, just about the heart. So for each title, I'll hit the slash button and I'll get toggle up. So with the toggle, you can put any questions. So what is the anatomy of the heart? And then under the toggle you can put the answer in. So with the answer I can just like close it, and then I can move on to the next question. So that's another question, and within that I can put an answer within that as well. So good thing about Notion is I can write out the answers, or I can drag and drop screenshots or photos as well that I find online. And I could do the same with Notability on my iPad as well, but the problem with that is I could see the answer. So before I could test myself, the answers would already be there, and I would quickly glance at the answers, and it would be difficult for me to test myself, and then I'll end up reading the whole thing through, and that's not efficient when it comes to revising for exams. So this way the answers are hidden underneath each toggle, and I can test myself and see which ones I get right or wrong. So yeah, this is how I make notes using Notion as well. So yeah, I'll just get rid of this. So right now the rotation I'm on is neurology and care of the elderly. It's a bit messy, ignore that. But for example, if I go to CNS infection, all the stuff is in question format. So first I got some definitions, and then after that, what I did is I basically made the text into grey, so it's kind of not that visible, but those are the questions. So what's meningitis, encephalitis, myelitis, all these stuff. And then I'll test myself and then check if I got it right. So these are all the terms for that. And basically what it is I took a lecture and just made it into questions, and I've got all the answers beneath each of the toggles. So I take all the notes, whether it's in the textbook or lectures or material that I find online, into question format, so I can test myself when it comes to exams. And by doing this, I find it way more efficient, and it's easier for me to understand everything and go straight on to trying to memorize it. So yeah, this is how I take notes during medical school. I started off using Notability as my go-to app to handwrite all my stuff and drag bits and bobs in. But when it comes to exam time, I don't really have a way of testing myself. I end up just reading through everything, and that's not very efficient because there's a lot of content to get through, and if I just read it, I'm more likely to forget it. So using Notion, I make stuff into questions so that I can test myself. So that way it's active recall of the information that I put in. So it's much better way of learning stuff, and because there's a lot of content in medicine, it helps me to absorb more stuff and know a bit more. So this is how I moved from Notability more onto Notion. But if I have stuff that I want to draw or handwrite or just have as a diagram to go through, then I'll use Notability, but it's these two apps that I mainly use. I've seen people use Anki to test themselves. Some people use OneNote or Evernote to make their notes. But what I want to say is that do what works for you. If you like just handwriting stuff, just using pen and paper, that's fine. Do what works for you. But I find that this is really efficient for me and it helps me get through a lot of content and get straight onto learning the stuff that I need to learn. So that's it. I hope that's been useful and it hasn't been too long. If you enjoy these videos and if you want to keep up with the weekly content, then subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it. So that's it from me. Have a nice day and take care. I'll see you on the next one.